In this video, we introduce the forms of Koine Greek third declension nouns. And I give you forewarning from the very beginning that the third declension is one of the two things that most Greek students complain about and bemoan the most. This is because you've already gotten so used to those second declension and those first declension nouns, and now we throw in this new category of the third declension that sort of muddies the water a little bit. But don't fear, there's some handy tips and tricks that I'm going to give you in this video to make navigating the third declension a little bit easier for you. And by way of preview, the other thing that Greek students tend to bemoan and weep and wail about is participles, which we'll be getting to in just a little bit here as well. So moving back to the grammatical basics of Greek nouns. You've seen this slide a handful of times before. Nouns have three different things. They have case, they have gender, and they have number. Remember, a Greek noun's gender is never going to change. A noun is either going to be masculine, it's going to be feminine, or it's going to be neuter, and it's going to be in different forms that correspond to those genders, but it's not going to change its gender. Whereas it will change its case and its number based on its function in the sentence, so that a Greek noun can be in the nominative case if it's the subject of the sentence. If it's showing possession or description, it will be in the genitive case. If a word is the indirect object in the sentence, it will be in the dative case. And if a word is the direct object, it will be in the accusative case. And then a Greek noun will change its number, whether it's a singular thing or a plural thing. But we've also talked about declensions. If you remember way back to the beginning of this course, we introduced the second declension and then the first declension. And we talked about how a declension is a pattern by which, a regular pattern by which Greek nouns change their forms for these different cases and numbers. And we saw the first declension forms, we saw the second declension forms. You've done some memorization of those, and now we get to the third declension. So in the second declension, this is the first. The second declension is the first declension that we introduced. These are a category of nouns that end in os in the nominative singular, like logos, and they are usually masculine. But remember, declension and gender do not line up. They don't correspond in a one-to-one way. And we'll see that's especially the case in the third declension. So in the nominative singular, of the masculine, these are going to be ending in os, and then the neuter, the nominative singular, are going to end in on. Then the first declension is going to be a group of mostly feminine nouns, and there's going to be exceptions of nouns that are also masculine, but in the first declension, that end in alpha or eta if they're feminine, or if they end in epsilon sigma or alpha sigma in the nominative singular. These are masculine first declension nouns, and they're going to follow that masculine first declension paradigm. With the third declension, we have a group of nouns that are going to end in omicron sigma, so like up here, and we'll note this confusion in just in another slide in just a moment here. In the omicron sigma in the genitive singular. And we'll talk about why I say the genitive singular rather than giving you the nominative singular as I have in all of these cases in just a moment here. But so the third declension is going to end in omicron sigma in the genitive singular, and it's going to be a group of nouns that is all three genders. So the third declension is going to have masculines, it's going to have feminines, and it's going to have neuters. So it doesn't strongly correspond to any of the three different Greek genders. And so here are the forms of the third declension. You can see here that we have the masculine and the feminine on the left-hand side with a couple alternate forms. Sometimes in the nominative singular, you'll see the sigma as the ending, and sometimes it will use no ending at all. It won't add anything at all to the stem. And then the other alternate ending, or the different way that a third declension noun is formed is with a nu in the accusative singular or with an alpha. So two different forms of the accusative singular, either ending in alpha or ending in nu. And notice here, Once again, this is a consistent pattern that we've seen. The neuter, nominative, and accusative are going to be identical to one another. This is true in the singular. It's also true in the plural. And these differ from what we see in the masculine and the feminine. So that these correspond to one another and they're different from what we find over here. So with respect to the third declension, as I said, we're dealing with nouns that end in omicron sigma in the genitive singular. And the reason that I give you this information and that Black gives you this information in the grammar is because the sigma that is characteristic of the nominative singular of the third declension causes a variety of changes. So that actually the genitive singular of the third declension is the sort of most regular form. It's the form by which you're going to be able to determine the root of the Greek noun and then add on these other endings to make the different cases and numbers. So for example, if you were to take this sigma and add it to the a third declension root sarc, when you add that kappa, or when you add a sigma to that kappa, you're going to get changes. So it's sarcs, rather because of the combination of the kappa and the sigma that we learned about with amalgamation. So you're going to see different kinds of changes like this, both in the nominative singular and also in the dative plural, because both have a sigma. But you're also going to see changes when no ending is added, that the root is going to sort of compensate for the fact that nothing has been added in a variety of different ways, so that the nominative singular of a third declension form is going to look the most odd. It's going to be sort of the odd person out as to the forms or as to the endings. And so what you'll find in the vocabulary list and what you'll find in Greek grammars, or in Greek lexicons, I should say, in Greek dictionaries, is that third declension forms are going to always be listed with their nominative form, so hey sarcs, but then also right after it, they're going to have their genitive form. So in the dictionary, for example, you'll see sarcs, sarkos, and then actually in a dictionary, you'll have the article following rather than coming before the word. And this is going to be the nominative singular form, and then the more regular genitive singular form. And so what happens then is that you can take off this os ending of the genitive singular to find the root. You can't do that with the nominative because you don't actually have the ending there. The sigma has been made its way into the kappa there. So this is going to tell you, the genitive form is going to tell you what the true root is of a third declension noun, so that when you add on something like the iota, it's just going to be sarki with the iota there, or sarka if you're doing the accusative singular. Those are just added on to this root without any changes happening. So that's the reason that you're given the genitive singular form there. And so then I gave you, then I have given you here this same information from up here down here, that this is what it's going to look like in the dictionary or in a vocabulary list. The nominative singular, the genitive singular, and then the definite article, once again, always telling you what the gender is. So in this case, sarx is a feminine noun because we have the feminine nominative singular definite article. If you have the masculine singular ha, then you know that you have a masculine noun, and that, remember, gender is not going to change with respect to Greek nouns. Or if you have ta, then you know that you have a neuter third declension noun. So a little bit more here. Memorizing, when you do the vocabulary, that nominative form and the genitive form is going to be really important so that you can know what the root is. By throwing in that genitive into your memorization, into your mind, you're going to be able to recognize the forms of third declension nouns much better. And this is why on the vocabulary cards we have both the nominative and the genitive there. And you'll notice that there's some similar forms, or some of these things, some of the forms of the third declension are going to look like forms that you have already memorized. So for example, the genitive singular of the third declension, this os ending, looks like the nominative singular of the second declension, which has its os right up here. So just note the confusion here that os, when you see os in the wild, in a translation, it doesn't necessarily mean a nominative singular. It could also mean genitive singular, depending on whether you have a second declension noun or a third declension noun. And this is why third declension is so frustrating to Greek students, is because it muddies the water, as I said at the beginning of this video. And the same thing is true of the accusative singular of the third declension. The on here looks like some endings of the nominative singular in the first declension. So you see here the example, hey Hemera, the day has a name, ta anima. This is the word for name. Notice that the alpha ending at the end, this alpha looks the same, so that you might expect anima to be a feminine nominative singular, but actually it's a neuter accusative singular. And so as you can see, with respect to this example here, the definite article is really helpful for you. So hey right here tells you that you have a feminine nominative singular. Remember, the definite article paradigm is going to be tried and true. It's going to be consistent and say the same. That's the same for ta. So this ta is going to tell you that you have a neuter singular, either nominative or accusative. In this case, we know it's accusative because it's the object of the sentence. So the definite article is always, when it's there, I should say, it's going to help you out. And this is why I've urged you over and over and over again to memorize that definite article paradigm very well. If you haven't done it yet, I still encourage you. This is not going to be the last time that I tell you that memorizing the definite article paradigm is going to help you. It's going to help you again in the future with other new things that we're going to learn. So you can get your parsing information for nouns from the definite article when it's there. So even though this looks like something else, or it sort of looks like a nominative singular of the first declension, the ta is going to let you know that it's actually a neuter accusative rather than a feminine in this case. And then, so what I want to do here is, given that the definite article is your friend, I want you to go ahead and do a lecture pause here and parse. Oops, I thought there was 5 there. There's only 4. I jumped the gun. I want you to go ahead and parse each one of these very quickly. So pause the lecture, and on your whiteboard, go ahead and give us the case, gender, and number of these 4 different nouns. I'm going to pause and do the same thing here. All right, so this is what you should look like here. So all of these are going to be singulars, and these 3, the bottom 3, are going to be third declension forms, whereas this one up here is a second declension. And so really you could just sort of ignore the noun altogether here if you wanted to, and just look to the article for your parsing information. And this is why I tell you that the definite article is your friend. So from the ha, we know that this is nominative masculine singular. From the to, we know that this is genitive, either masculine or neuter singular based on the form to, but archon, the word that this comes from, is a masculine word. So our correct parsing information is genitive masculine singular. Ta soma is going to be nominative or accusative. That ta and the form soma can by its form either be a nominative or accusative. The only way we know which one it is based on the context of a sentence. It's neuter and it's singular. And then lastly, te pole, we have dative, feminine, singular. So if you got all these right, or if you didn't, let's go ahead and high five it on 3. 1, 2, 3, boom. And on to something else. And here I'm going to give you another mnemonic. So if you remember from the second declension, we have swain ionisus, roughly corresponding to the different endings of second declension nouns. We have asina ionisas, Sorry, that one is always a mouthful for me. Roughly corresponding to our first declension endings. Remember, these aren't one-to-one correspondences necessarily. So what I'm going to do is give you another mnemonic for the third declension. And the name of this person is Sosia Esonsias. Sosia Esonsias. Go ahead and say it with me 3 times. Sosia Esonsias. Sosia Esonsias. Sosia Esonsias. And I want to give you a little piece of Italian language here. I don't know Italian, but Sosia in Italian is the word for doppelganger or double. So if you were to look up Sosia on Google, this is one of the first images that comes up. This woman, who I don't know who she is, but apparently she is Adele's Sosia. Adele's double here. And what this helps me remember, this double bit, is that the third declension does double and really triple duty for all of the genders. It does, it's a category of nouns that contains masculine, feminine, and neuter forms. So it does double duty there. But Sosia is going to be this woman here. And to put just her face to take Adele away, this is what it looks like. And notice how her lipstick and her eyeshadow matches our color here. This is one of the reasons I have chosen her for our image. And the way that this works out is that Sosia Esonsias roughly matches up or roughly corresponds to some of our endings of the third declension. So I want to be clear, it doesn't match up with all of them. We have some things left out, namely if a nominative singular does not use an ending. And also the new is missing from the nominative singular here. And then these different neuter nominative and accusatives. Remember, the neuter nominative and accusative is always going to defer from the masculine and the feminine, and they're always going to be identical to one another. So what you do sort of with this mnemonic is, if you memorize Sosia Esonsias, this helps you fill in this part, Sosia Esonsias, and then you have to sort of fill in these other parts that are missing from Sosia Esonsias. And this basic paradigm over here, these basic endings over here, these are the ones that you're going to be asked to memorize. And this is sort of a large paradigm for your reference, that when you add these different endings onto different words, we're going to see those different changes. And what I want to do is just walk through some of these here. We're going to just go from top to bottom and then moving from left to right. So notice with archon, we have no ending added on here, that there's no sigma anywhere in that own. And then with these three, really all the way down, we have, it's very regular, Sosia Esonsias. So the root is archont. Remember, to find the root of a third declension noun, you look to the genitive singular and you take off that os. And this is going to be given to you in the dictionary form or in the flashcard form. It's going to be archon, archontos. And the reason archontos is given to you is so that you know that archont is the root to which these endings are added. So the os, e, a, s, on, c, os gets added onto the archont, and you'll notice that there's a little bit of a change right here. Arcusen, the new tau doesn't like to have a sigma with it, so it drops out, and the Omicron has lengthened to an U. So where you're going to see the most irregularities is in the nominative singular and the dative plural. And you'll see that across all of these here. And that's consistent throughout the third declension. So let's move over. So remember, we have masculine, feminine, and neuter genders represented by the third declension or contained within the third declension. This one was nominative, archon. So this is our nominative form. Ha baselus, the king, is another masculine word. You see the sigma used over here, added to the root. You notice here that the os ending has changed a little bit, and this is because this omicron has lengthened to an omega when it's added to this epsilon here. So even though it's not exactly the same, it should be recognizable to you insofar as these are both O's. Omicron, O little, and omega, O big. And then E, ah, so these are regular. S has gone to ace here, and this is because of the combination of the epsilon with the epsilon of the root. An epsilon plus an epsilon is going to make epsilon iota. So that's what's happened here. And you don't need to know all of these rules. This is just me explaining to you what's happening. And if this is unhelpful for you, then you can forget all of this stuff. S, own, C, and then the same thing has happened down here with the combination of the epsilon and the alpha that we've gone to the ace here. So this is a case where the nominative and the accusative are actually the same form. Moving over to the feminine, we have hey sarx and hey Paulus. The root is going to be sark. Remember, to get the root, we take off the os of the genitive form. And so when the sigma is added to that, we get the xe. And then we have this all being fairly regular, Sosia Esonsias. And then the sin, or the C with the movable nu here, has gone to xe, just like in the nominative singular, because of the combination of the kappa with the sigma. And then os at the end is regular. Here for Paulus, which means city, we have fairly regular, that we have the sigma carried over. We have the os ending has gone to os, a long O, just like in basileos, because of the same thing, because of this epsilon vowel here that's part of the stem. The iota is consistent. And remember also, I should note that the dative is always going to have a iota somewhere. In the case of the third declension singular, it's not subscripted. But remember, in the first and second declension, we have a iota, but it goes under the long vowel. It's a little iota. And then here with pollen, we have the alternate, or the other ending, the new added on. And that's why I have not put it in our purple Sosia color, because it's not included in Sosia Esonsias, but it is still a third declension ending. It's just not part of our mnemonic. That's why it's not in that color. And then the same thing, our combination here to make ace for both the nominative and the accusative, and the own and the C here. And then over to the neuter, remember that the accusative and the nominative and the accusative are going to look identical to one another. So you see that here with soma, soma, somata, somata, and then also in genos, 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 gene, gene. They look identical to one another. And you see also that we have the asi here that from our mnemonic is contained, but our differences are going to be in the nominative and the accusative. And then also down here in the onsi, we have those carried over from our mnemonic, but some differences. And so once again, to find out our root, we want to take off the os ending from the genitive singular. So somat is our root of soma. And what happens is that when no ending is added to somat, the tau drops off. Tau doesn't like to be the last letter in a Greek word, so it'll drop off. And that's why we get soma, even though the root is somat. And you add those endings onto the somat. So you add on os, you add on e, no endings used. So you have the soma again. And then the a is added on to somat for the nominative and accusative plural of soma. And then over here on genos, we have our root being, and this is probably one of the most irregular third declension forms here. We have our root technically being genes, which we really only see here because of the changes in the vowels that have happened here. But notice again that the neuter, nominative, and accusative are going to look identical to one another, and that's going to be true in the accusative, or the singular and the plural. And I'm not going to walk us through the different changes that have gone on with this root, because the epsilon sigma, when you add things to epsilon sigma, you get all kinds of changes, and those changes have sort of they have made their way in here. This is more for your reference. I don't want to explain it because I think it will muddy the waters too much to explain the different changes that have gone on with respect to this paradigm here. But you can still see sort of the endings contained within them in most cases of the genos paradigm here. So what we're going to do to close out here is 3 different short examples. We're going to pay particular attention to the third declension forms in these sentences. So I'm going to read it for us, and then I'm going to ask you to identify for me, pause and identify which the third declension noun is. Genoskamen, ton, Christon, kata, tain, sarka. So which word here is the third declension noun? You're absolutely right. It is going to be sarka in tain, sarka. And notice we have the article before it. So this is going to be our strong clue to what our parsing information is. So if you know your definite article paradigm well, you know that this is what case, gender, and number. That's right, accusative, feminine, singular, way to go. And that's reflected over here. If we look to the accusative, feminine, singular, we see the alpha as the third declension ending. So the root, remember, for sarx, we get from sarkos in the genitive. So if this were listed in the vocabulary, it would look like this. Sarx, sarkos. To find the root, we take off that genitive singular ending. We know it's sark. And then this a of the accusative singular is added on. So that we have sarka, tain, sarka. And so because we know that this is the accusative case, we know it's probably going to be the object of something. And in this case, it's the object in this prepositional phrase, kata, tain, sarka. So kata, when it takes the accusative case, is what? That's right, according to. So according to the flesh. And then to get the rest of our sentence in here, we know, genoskamen, a present active indicative first person plural. We know, this is our verb, ton Christon, the object of the verb. We know the Christ according to the flesh. Let's try another one here. See if you can identify the third declension noun here. And you probably saw that there were 2. Very well done. Both karati and pisteos are third declension nouns. With one, we have a definite article before it, so that's going to make our finding our parsing information easier. With the other, we do not. So let's start with te karati. And because we had this te before it, if we know our definite article paradigm well, we know this is going to be what case, gender, and number. That's right, dative, feminine, singular. And this dative over here, the iota is characteristic of the dative in all 3 declensions. In this case, we have it connected, we have it in the word itself, a iota that's not subscripted. If we were to look up this word in the dictionary, it would be, or in our vocabulary list, it would be charis, charitas. So this is our irregular nominative form or less regular nominative form. And the genitive form is going to give us our root, charit. We take off the os to get the genitive root, charit, and then we can stick on that iota to give us the dative form here. So we have a dative feminine singular. And then over here with pisteos, we need to look onto our paradigm here. We can look at our general forms, but in this case, actually, this is going to be a little bit more helpful for us. So what we're going to have is this os ending that we see in basileos and paleos, and we don't have. So we know based on that we're going to have a genitive singular. So both of these are genitive singulars, but one is feminine and one is masculine. And the only way we know that this is actually a feminine form is because it is a feminine word. So you have not learned this yet, but I know, based on my knowledge of Greek, that pistis looks like this in the dictionary with a hey after it, which tells us it's what? Masculine or feminine? That's right, it's feminine. So our parsing information here is going to be genitive feminine singular. And so to put this all together, well, let's look at this verb real quick and do a bit of review. What's this theta eta right here in the verb telling us with respect to voice? Do you think this is an active, a middle, or a passive voice based on the theta eta? Nailed it. Passive voice, this men ending, first person plural. So we have been, and we know it's past tense because of what? Yes, exactly right. It's past tense because it has this augment here. So we have been, and then the root is here in this so, which it's from sozo, I save. So we have been, or we were saved in the aorist past tense. So we were saved in grace or by grace, dia pisteos, through faith. So we were saved by grace through faith. And our two third declension verbs or nouns, are karate and pisteos. And let's do one last example here to close it out. We have ta ethne u genoske ta thelema kai tain karin tu theu. So in this case, we have 3 different third declension nouns. I'm going to give you that ahead of time and ask you to go ahead and guess which 3 nouns here are going to be third declension. That's right. Ta ethne, ta thelema, and tain karin. So with all 3, we have a definite article that's going to give us our parsing information. So quite fortuitously, we don't have any here that don't have a definite article. So knowing that definite article paradigm helps us out. We know that this ta is going to be either nominative or accusative neuter plural. And we look over to our paradigm here, and we find this matching up with the a. So gene and ethne. This ethne follows this paradigm here. So we know it's nominative or accusative neuter plural. And based on its function in the sentence, we're going to know that it's actually nominative. So the nations u genoske. This is do not know. So this is a present active indicative third person singular. And a bit of a trick question here. Not really a trick question, but a tricky question. Why do we have a singular verb, but we said this is a plural subject? Why a singular verb with a plural subject? I'm very glad you remember that. A neuter plural subject will take a singular verb. So even though this is plural, because it's neuter plural, the neuter plural is often going to have its verb in the singular, the third person singular. So the nations as a collective group don't know, and what they don't know is ta thelema and tain karin tu theu. So with these third declensions, we're going to go ahead and look to our definite articles to get our parsing information here. And we know with ta that we're going to have a neuter, and it's going to be nominative or accusative, and it's going to be singular. In this case, because it's going to be the object of the verb, we already have a subject, so this is not going to be the subject of the verb because we already have that subject. There's no other verb over here. We have this as the object. Thelema is a word that means will, so the will. The nations don't know, the will, and tain karin. So once again, with this definite article, we get our parsing information. We have an accusative feminine singular and the word karin here is one we already saw, is charis. Grace, with this alternate new ending here. So the nations don't know the will and the grace, also as an object in the accusative, to theou, a word or phrase that we've seen many, many times now, of God in the genitive case here. So to put it together, the nations don't know the will and the grace of God.